The roar split the dawn sky like thunder unleashed. Silver wings caught morning light as they swept low across hostile terrain. What happened next would echo through military history forever. This was the day courage met catastrophe head-on. The day when America's boldest gamble turned into its bloodiest nightmare. The mission that promised to strangle Hitler's war machine became instead a furnace that consumed heroes. But why did Operation Tidal Wave become known as Black Sunday? The answer lies buried in smoke, fire, and the wreckage of dreams. Romanian oil fields stretched like a golden treasure beneath enemy guns. These vast refineries pumped the lifeblood into Hitler's empire. Every German tank that rolled across Europe drank from these wells. Every Luftwaffe fighter that climbed toward Allied bombers burned Romanian fuel. Every U-boat that prowled the Atlantic depths ran on oil from Ploiesti. Without this black gold, the Nazi war machine would choke and die. American strategists understood this deadly equation. Strike here with enough force, and Germany's armies would grind to a halt. The war might end years earlier. Millions of lives could be saved. Yet Ploiesti stood protected like a fortress. Anti-aircraft guns ringed every refinery tower. Fighters waited on hidden airstrips. Romanian defenders had turned their city into a maze of death. How could Allied bombers penetrate such defenses? The answer came in a plan so audacious it bordered on madness. Instead of attacking from safe altitudes, the B-24 Liberators would sweep in at treetop level. Surprise would be their shield. Speed would be their weapon. The strategy demanded perfect execution. 178 heavy bombers would thunder across 1,000 miles of enemy territory. They would thread valleys like silver arrows. They would skim chimneys and dodge church steeples. They would strike with surgical precision before defenders could react. Training began in the Libyan desert. Crews practiced until their maneuvers became instinct. They memorized every pipeline, every storage tank, every refinery tower. Maps were studied until pilots could navigate with their eyes closed. But doubts lingered in the hot desert air. The B-24 Liberator was built for high-altitude bombing, not for hedge-hopping through enemy defenses. At such low levels, a single burst of flak could shred an entire crew. One mistake could turn triumph into disaster. Still, the mission pressed forward. General Louis Brereton assured Washington that success was within reach. The crews, though wary, accepted their fate. They would fly into hell itself if it meant shortening the war. August 1, 1943, dawned clear over North Africa. Engines coughed to life on dusty airstrips. Propellers bit into the morning air. One by one, the silver bombers lifted from the desert floor. Their destination lay far beyond the horizon. Their target waited like a spider in its web. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly below the formation. Hundreds of engines drummed in harmony. Inside cramped cockpits, men settled in for the longest flight of their lives. More than 1,000 miles of hostile airspace separated them from their target. Navigation proved treacherous from the start. Mountains twisted below like broken teeth. Rivers snaked through valleys that all looked identical. Even experienced navigators struggled to match reality with their maps. Then, catastrophe struck without warning. The lead formation missed a crucial checkpoint. Instead of following the planned route, they veered east. The carefully orchestrated attack began fracturing before it reached enemy territory. What should have been a single devastating hammer blow was splitting into scattered strikes. Some groups would arrive early. Others would attack from wrong directions. The element of surprise was bleeding away with each passing mile. Inside the bombers, tension mounted like pressure in a boiler. Pilots scanned empty skies for their missing comrades. Radio silence, maintained to preserve secrecy, left each crew isolated and alone. All they could do was trust their instruments and pray the mission would somehow hold together. As the formations crossed into Yugoslavia, civilians below witnessed an incredible spectacle. Silver giants roared overhead so low that laundry lines whipped in their wake. Children pointed in wonder. Farmers froze in their fields. To the villagers, it was magnificent. To the airmen, it was the final approach to hell. Romanian spotters had already detected the approaching armada. Telephone lines buzzed with urgent warnings. Anti-aircraft crews raced to their positions. Fighter pilots sprinted to their cockpits. The trap was being prepared. The bombers pressed onward, hugging the earth like hunting hawks. Trees flashed past in green blurs. Bridges appeared suddenly, then vanished behind them. The ground raced beneath their wings at terrifying speed. Inside the aircraft, sweat poured down grime-streaked faces. Gunners gripped their weapons with white knuckles. Navigators whispered silent prayers. Pilots fought to maintain formation as their world compressed into a tunnel of speed and danger. But the plan was already unraveling. Some groups, thrown off course, circled desperately to reorient themselves. Others charged straight ahead, unaware they were minutes ahead of schedule. The choreography had collapsed into chaos. In the distance, refinery towers rose like steel tombstones. Dark smoke trailed from countless chimneys. The target was finally within reach. But Romanian defenders were ready and waiting. The city of Ploiesti materialized through the heat haze like a vision from hell. Massive storage tanks gleamed silver in the sunlight. Refinery towers stabbed skyward like skeletal fingers. Pipelines snaked between buildings like metal serpents. Black smoke from countless chimneys created a pall that hung over everything. Then the sky exploded into violence. Anti-aircraft guns erupted from every concealment. Not just military positions, but rooftops, gardens, even church bell towers. Thousands of shells clawed upward, bursting into black flowers of death. Tracer rounds streaked through the air like deadly fireworks. The carefully planned mission dissolved into chaos within seconds. The first B-24 shuddered as shrapnel tore through its aluminum skin. Flames spread across the wing like burning fingers. The bomber nosed downward and crashed into a refinery in a pillar of fire. Other aircraft pressed their attacks through walls of flak. Wings clipped treetops. Landing gear scraped rooftops. Pilots dodged chimneys and smokestacks, while bombs tumbled from open bay doors. The air filled with smoke, flame, and the screams of dying engines. One Liberator clipped a refinery tower, shearing off part of its wing before cartwheeling into the ground. Another flew so low that heat from burning oil blistered paint from its belly. Crews fought to hold formation as their world disintegrated around them. But the bombs were finding their targets. Explosions rippled across storage facilities. Columns of fire shot hundreds of feet into the air. A sea of burning petroleum rolled across the landscape, consuming everything in its path. The ground convulsed under the impact of high explosives. Each successful bomb run came at a terrible price. Aircraft were torn apart in mid-flight. Crews bailed out over the inferno they had created. Some parachuted directly into the flames of burning refineries. Others were captured before their feet touched ground. Colonel John Kane's formation charged headlong into the heaviest defenses. His planes flew so low that burning fuel splashed across their wings. Heat scorched their aluminum skins. yet they pressed on with surgical precision. Kane's courage would later earn him the Medal of Honor. Many of his men would never live to see another sunrise. Miscommunication turned deadly in other sectors. One group entered from the wrong direction, crossing directly into concentrated anti-aircraft fire. They were shredded in minutes. The sky rained burning wreckage. Survivors who managed to bail out landed in the very fires they had come to ignite. Romanian defenders fought with desperate fury. Gun crews, trained and ready, unleashed curtains of steel that seemed impossible to penetrate. Civilians joined the battle, some firing rifles at the low-flying bombers. Everywhere the Americans turned, they met resistance. Yet still they came. Each crew pressed through the gauntlet of death. Each man knew the odds, but none turned back. They had sworn to destroy Ploiesti, and they would honor that oath even if it cost them everything. By midday, the refineries burned like funeral pyres. Entire complexes were reduced to infernos. Black smoke rose so high it darkened the noon sun. The earth shook with continuous explosions. From above, it looked as though hell itself had erupted through the ground. But the cost was staggering beyond calculation. Formation after formation had been shattered. Radio channels crackled with desperate calls for help, then fell silent forever. The orderly mission had become a graveyard in motion. Through it all, individual acts of heroism blazed brighter than the fires below. One burning B-24 continued its bomb run even as flames consumed the cockpit. The pilot held steady until his ordnance struck home, then vanished in a thunderclap of destruction. His sacrifice ignited storage tanks that would burn for weeks. Lieutenant Addison Baker and his co-pilot John Gerstad epitomized this spirit of sacrifice. Their Liberator was already crippled, smoke pouring from damaged engines, flames licking at the wings. They could have broken away to safety. Instead, they drove straight into the heart of the defenses. Their bombs found their target with deadly accuracy. A heartbeat later, their aircraft disintegrated in a ball of fire. Both men died instantly. Both received the Medal of Honor posthumously. Their names became legend, but their lives were gone forever. The radio waves filled with the sounds of disaster. Desperate voices called for help. Engines coughed and died. Men screamed as their planes broke apart around them. Commanders tried desperately to restore order, but the mission had shattered beyond repair. Each crew was now fighting for survival against impossible odds. They battled not just the enemy, but time, fate, and the grinding jaws of death itself. The carefully planned operation had become a test of individual courage and determination. As the final waves of bombers roared over the burning city, Ploiesti resembled a landscape from nightmares. Columns of smoke towered into the sky like black monuments. The ground below was scarred with craters, littered with wreckage, painted with fire. Yet through it all, the attacks continued. Bombers pressed home their runs despite overwhelming opposition. Men died at their posts rather than abandon their missions. The sky had become both battlefield and graveyard, but still they came. The climax of Operation Tidal Wave was written not in victory, but in blood and sacrifice. Ploiesti burned, yes, but so did dozens of American aircraft. The price of courage had never been calculated so precisely or paid so dearly. For those still airborne, only one challenge remained. They had to find their way home through 1,000 miles of hostile territory. Many would not make it. When the last bombers clawed their way out of the smoke and flame, the true scope of the disaster became clear. The mighty armada that had departed Libya in strength was now scattered wreckage. Formations that once numbered dozens now counted survivors on their fingers. Out of 178 B-24 Liberators that began the mission, 53 were lost over Romania. Nearly one-third of the entire force had been destroyed in a single morning. More than 660 men were dead, wounded, or captured. Entire crews had vanished into the flames without trace. The survivors faced a nightmare journey home. Radios were destroyed. Fuel gauges showed critically low levels. Aircraft were riddled with holes, engines trailing smoke and fire. Some managed to limp back to North African airfields. Others crash-landed in Cyprus, Sicily, or neutral Turkey. Many simply disappeared over the Mediterranean, never to be found. Behind them, Romanian defenders celebrated their victory. Yes, the refineries burned, but repair crews were already mobilizing. Within hours, damage assessment teams moved through the wreckage. Pipelines could be patched. Storage tanks could be replaced. Production would resume within weeks. The strategic impact was far less than Allied planners had hoped. Ploiesti continued pumping fuel into Hitler's war machine. The oil that powered German tanks still flowed eastward. Luftwaffe fighters still climbed skyward, burning Romanian petroleum. The sacrifice had been enormous, but the results were disappointingly small. In Washington and London, news of the raid sent shockwaves through military leadership. It had been one of the most daring operations in aviation history. It had also been one of the most costly failures. The press celebrated the heroism of the air crews, while military leaders quietly reassessed their strategies. The human cost defied comprehension. Families across America received telegrams that would haunt them forever. "We regret to inform you," became the opening phrase of countless nightmares. Communities lost their sons in a single day. The price of freedom had been paid in full measure. Yet courage was not forgotten. 5 medals of honor were awarded for actions over Ploiesti, an unprecedented number for a single mission. Dozens of Distinguished Service Crosses and Silver Stars followed. The bravery of the air crews became legend, carved into the history books with blood and sacrifice. But medals could not bring back the dead. Black Sunday remained a wound that never fully healed for those who survived it, and for the families who waited in vain for sons and husbands who would never return home. The lessons of Ploiesti echoed through the remaining years of the war. Never again would Allied air forces attempt such a low-level strategic bombing mission. The price had been too high, the results too meager. Courage alone could not overcome prepared defenses and concentrated firepower. American bombing strategy shifted dramatically in the months that followed. High-altitude raids became standard procedure. Long-range fighter escorts like the P-51 Mustang provided protection. Precision gave way to overwhelming force. Mass formations replaced individual heroics. The era of surgical strikes was over. Operation Tidal Wave became a case study in military academies around the world. It demonstrated both the heights of human courage and the limitations of tactical planning. The men who flew that mission became symbols of sacrifice, their names enshrined in the pantheon of aviation heroes. For Romania, the raid was only the beginning. Allied bombers would return again and again to Ploiesti. Each attack grew larger and more devastating than the last. By 1944, the oil fields were finally destroyed beyond repair. The city that had withstood Black Sunday eventually fell to sustained aerial assault. Today, historians view Ploiesti through the lens of strategic necessity and human cost. The mission failed to achieve its primary objective of crippling German oil production, but it succeeded in demonstrating the incredible courage of young Americans willing to die for freedom. The refineries that burned on August 1st, 1943, have long since been rebuilt. The scars on the landscape have healed, but the memory of Black Sunday lives on, a testament to valor in the face of impossible odds. Those silver bombers that swept so low over Romanian soil carried more than high explosives. They carried the hopes of a generation, the dreams of victory, the promise of peace. When they crashed in flames, those dreams seemed to die with them. But courage never dies. It lives on in the stories we tell, the lessons we learn, the freedom we defend. The men of Operation Tidal Wave paid the ultimate price for that freedom. Their sacrifice ensures that Black Sunday will never be forgotten, and their courage will inspire generations yet unborn. The sky above Ploiesti is quiet now. The thunder of engines has faded into history. But on certain mornings, when the sun rises over those Romanian fields, locals say you can still hear them. The ghosts of silver bombers, flying forever toward their impossible target, carrying heroes who refuse to turn back from the gates of hell itself.